Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here in person or online. My name is Dr. Natalia Bell, and I'm here with Dr. Alex Bazira. We are both professors of cybersecurity, IT and cybersecurity at Marymount University. We're both assistant professors, tenure track. So we've been with Marymount for a couple of years now. I've been, what, five years?
About 5 years.
5 years. So, and we have 2 of our students in the room. So thank you for, for the attendance. This is the first time I am at DuPont Summit. I think Dr. Alex as well. So very happy to be here and very pleased with the conference so far. What we're going to talk today is it's actually a proposal. So it's an idea that me and Dr. Alice have been talking for a while, and this was a great moment so we can put together a proposal. So we're trying to put a proposal together that will create a cyber diplomacy cooperation framework. So, and today's presentation is rather a justification or a problem statement why we need such a framework in place for the current situation. And definitely this is a work in progress or a starting point for our future research, particularly because this is not a very commonly debated topic in the industry or in research, so it's quite new. So we wanted to be pioneering this idea, and we are very happy to receive any inputs or any recommendations because we plan to work on it. So a little bit why we decided putting these 2 concepts together. Particularly because we have seen in the previous years that the cyber attacks have been raising. We are cybersecurity professionals also, so we've been monitoring these cyber attacks. One of the things that we see that happened on our later years is cyber weapons, how we call them, are the new tools in the modern warfare. So this is something that we did not see in previous warfare happening. So in First World War or Second World War, we did not have cyberspace. So therefore, new cyber weapons is quite of a new concept that our era is living, particularly this new with the conflict that is happening right now in Ukraine. I might want to do a personal remark here. I am coming from Eastern Europe. I was born in the Republic of Moldova and raised in Romania. So as many of you know, because of the conflict, I have a very strong relationship with the emotional relationship, I would say, with what is happening. So I've been following very closely what happened in Ukraine and Russia, and coming from a neighborhood country, a post-Soviet country, I have been watching how Russia have been evolving their attacks on Ukraine. So one of the reasons why I started personally this topic is because I have seen the need on my own skin, let's put it this way, right? So when we're looking at cyber in general, we have seen that people started to talk about cybersecurity. However, because of these new cyber weapons or the way the cyber space is used in the modern warfare, there is new avenues for what we are calling cyber diplomacy, right? So cyber diplomacy would put together the traditional diplomatic system, and we're going to establish it in the cyber sphere, right? So what we're trying to accomplish is creating this cyber diplomacy cooperation framework. So when looking at the background, while cybersecurity is more or less a newer field, the information security system started in 1970s-ish after ARPANET and the internet became what it is today. But however, diplomatic or diplomacy is a way more ancient industry, if you want that, because we have diplomatic letters that come back from 14th century as before Christ, right? The BC, right? So this is happening way before. So it is kind of weird that while a diplomatic system is so well established, something like a cyber diplomacy in 2023 is a new concept, right? So that's why we are looking more or less how we can put this two concepts together to look at how we can provide a solution for these issues that happen in the modern world, which is cyber attacks, political manipulation, everything that is the combination of cyber and warfare, right? So a couple of definitions. So as I said, this is more of a conceptual one. So when we looked at what the industry says, as well as the literature, we are both researchers. So the first thing you would do is look for other research, limited research in terms of putting these two concepts together. However, there is a better understanding of the concepts in the industry. And I would say I'm from Europe, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but Europe has been better in putting the cyber diplomacy concepts together better than the US so far. However, US did some very dramatic steps, which we're going to talk about, which went ahead of Europe in terms of actions, but Europe was better in putting the terms together. So one of the definitions that we found, cyber diplomacy and digital diplomacy, often they are interchanged, but we understood that there is a difference between them. So the cyber diplomacy is more associated with diplomatic efforts to address cybersecurity challenges, but the digital diplomacy, it's rather used in contexts where we're adopting new tools in the diplomatic practice. So that's why it is important to mention, because the diplomacy wants to use digital tools, but here we're talking particularly about the diplomatic efforts in addressing cybersecurity issues like cyber attacks and so on, right? So the State Department uses digital diplomacy or digital policy, and it particularly refers to the state behavior in cyberspace. European Commission really likes digital agenda, so they say digital agenda everywhere. And the Council of European Union was the first ones that they are clearly naming cyber diplomacy as a core concept, right? So in Europe, they started to talk about cyber diplomacy in 2007 when we had a large-scale attack on Estonia. So this is when Europe started to talk more about there is a need for cooperation in cyberspace, where the states come together or the countries come together to talk about that, right? So we have a Paris Call for Trust and Security Cyberspace to 2018, NATO Secretary General looking at the cyber attacks seriousness 2019, and this is where we started to see more and more talking about cyber diplomacy. So the reason I say the US was really strong in putting actionable items on the cyber diplomacy agenda is when in September of 2022, which is just a couple months ago, they named the first ever ambassador at large of the department's Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy. So this is the first time we're hearing a cyber ambassador as a new, I guess, position, right, in the cyber diplomacy space, right? And then we will also have a sort of cyber diplomacy bill. I actually researched back in 2021. It did not move forward, but the Congress did talk about some cyber diplomacy concepts, right? And then we have a couple of geopolitical events that actually express the need for cyber diplomacy. So I think Dr. Alex is taking there, right?
Yes, for the most part, we tend to look at the conflict in Russia and Ukraine as a major, cyber event. But if you look back at 2010, when we had that cyber weapon, which was, which disrupted actually the industrial control systems for the nuclear plants in Iran. As we speak right now, there's been so many variants of that weapon, which were picked by different threat actors. Some of them nation state, others are just underground threat actors, and they're replicating it to target either companies across the world or even governments across the world. Then who doesn't know Snowden? the infamous NSA contractor. But the thing that comes from the documents that he released were showing the massive surveillance that governments were actually running on citizens. Okay, meaning that even for citizens abroad in other countries, that was being done without the legal ramifications which control how such intrusions were executed. Then in 2016, we heard about also the infamous Russian interference of the US elections, where there was a lot of information operations which were run to influence the way democratic processes were being run in the United States. And interestingly, we saw the same campaign running in other countries like India, Kenya, okay, which were also mimicking the same tactics and techniques. Then in 2017, we all know about WannaCry. WannaCry was a terrible ransomware attack, which actually pervaded over 150 countries, okay? And then right now, we're having conversations on the hybrid war on what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. So we looked around to see, besides the United States, if there were other countries that have gone ahead to implement cyber diplomacy programs in their foreign affairs divisions, like the State Department. And interestingly, UK has an ambassador for cyber, and this office is within their foreign office, okay? And this office plays a very, very important role in implementing UK's international cybersecurity policy. Other countries in the same space, we have France, and then we have Australia. Of course, these are all NATO allies. And it's only 5 countries in the whole world, including what? Including Israel. So now, we are trying to propose a framework. And the question that came in our minds as we were talking was, do we have any existing cyber diplomacy frameworks? Because if they're there, that means that something is not working. So we looked around, we saw the United Nations Group of Government Experts. It's a forum of experts from the member states that was established to study and make recommendations on cybersecurity issues. Then we all know about the Tallinn Manual, which has a lot of non-binding legal documents that provide guidance on how international law applies. But still, when it comes to cyber conflict, there is no clearly agreed upon law on how that will look like, and also how that law can be implemented. Then we also came across the Global Commissions on Stability of Cyberspace, and this is coming from a very independent organization that develops norms and policies that promote stability and security in cyberspace. Then, as my colleague talked about, she talked about the Paris Call, which is a very, very recent framework, which was just signed recently. But all it talks about is just the do's and the don'ts, but there's no hows, and also how we can be able to, to hold any countries that intrude other nation-state cyberspaces culpable and also accountable. Then we have on the Asian side the ASEAN Regional Forum, which also tries to promote security and stability within the Asian region.
So yes, so one of the things that we have seen, and as you can see from our presentation, is that all these individual states, countries, some of them have seen that there is a need for the cybersecurity. So everyone started to have some sort of initiatives. But the problem is they would not stay at the same table and discuss what is needed for like an overall cooperation. So so then if we have them, or in theory we have them, what happened, why they are not working? So we discovered that there are some reasons potentially why the current frameworks are not working the diplomatic cyberspace, if we want. And the first one is all the acts or all these recommendation bodies that we mentioned before, they don't have an actual enforcement mechanism. It's more of a recommendation. This would be nice and great if everyone can do, but not having an enforcement mechanism, basically no one is taking it seriously, right? So it's rather, okay, let's take some ideas, but not actual implementation. Another one is the limited participation. Not all the states are willing to participate in this type of frameworks, because this would mean that they should do some active cyber security actions in their local levels, and some of them work with cyber threat actors, talking about advanced persistent threats, which are the governments that they actually use cybersecurity as a weapon. So of course they would not to align themselves to fight against malicious cyber activity, right? And then the complexity of the cyber field. So the more and more we discuss the security, we realize that cybersecurity is not one industry, it's a multi-faced interdisciplinary field. So the fact that it's so complex, we see so many things changing all the time. So how we can be agile enough to adapt this framework in order to cover all these needs, right? So a couple of things that we also see all the time, ongoing political tensions. One of the things that happens a lot in the cyberspace is this power play, right? So countries want to own the cyberspace. So this ongoing geopolitical tensions, who is better than whom, this is not allowing us to agree upon some norms and rules that we all operate in the cyberspace. And then the tactics that the attackers are using, they are coming very sophisticated. So how we can address these threats in a timely manner, because we all know that a framework takes a lot of time. Well, cyber attackers are very agile and very quick. So will we be able to adapt that framework as quick as the attackers are creating new avenues for attack? So these are a couple of problems that we could see why there is no such a framework and why countries are not engaging in such a commitment, I guess, right? So when we're looking at what we would like to propose, in the cyberspace, there is no physical boundaries. So we need to look at all the actors. We need to look everyone, all the parties interested. And one of the most notable parties that are interested in maintaining peaceful and objectives is the UN. They had this UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework that more or less countries and states agreed upon that this is a good way of working together and not leaving anyone behind. So maybe looking at how UN did that as a good practice and adapt this to a cyber diplomacy framework would be a good practice. Then another thing that we need to look at, we are talking so many countries, and again, I'm from Europe. Yesterday I was in this conversation with at the European level, and every country came with their own problems and on the things. And in Europe, this is a huge issue because they all the time have so many different opinions. So how you put them all together the same table so they can discuss. So addressing national priorities and gaps in their own pathway towards cybersecurity, it will be a good way to start, because if we identify that we will fight the same fights internally, why don't we just cooperate and create something bigger, right? Spirit of the partnership. So we all should be in the same boat. So the attackers, the threat actors it's our common enemy. So this spirit of partnership is the key to get such a proposed cooperation framework working, right? And then specific needs and realities. All these countries have different realities. As I said, some of them are more advanced, some of them are less advanced. So addressing each specific needs and realities can help, because then countries have a better motivation to align themselves to something that is bigger, right? And then this is the most important one. I think that's where we started the idea, this shortage of existing diplomatic tools. So it's interesting because in this world, we have either diplomats or cybersecurity experts, how we put these two things together in one person, right? So we don't have too many diplomatic tools at the moment. So last year, like just a couple months ago, I participated in this European workshop where they were trying to train diplomats cybersecurity. And it was interesting, being a cybersecurity professional, it was really interesting to look how they're trying to explain cybersecurity to diplomats. So, and one of the things that we in Merimon do a lot is we are encouraging reskilling, upskilling, and also career changers. So we see this upskilling diplomats as we see the career changers. So how we can use the assets that a diplomat has currently to add the cybersecurity knowledge, or how you transform a cybersecurity professional in a diplomat. So whatever you want to say it. But the idea is that we have to have some tools that can put these two things together, right? So what we are looking at, we're looking at each country developed their own cybersecurity national priorities and frameworks. What if we would take those existing strategies and look what they have in common and take commonalities and build upon to build this framework, right? And just a couple of questions that we're looking at. So there are any agreeable norms in cyberspace that we will look as a partnership? Is there how we can balance out the power play between the countries, because the offensive and defensive cyber operation is something that every country is looking at. So how much we can balance this out so we can avoid conflict within the countries, right? And then another one that is very important for us, we all know that the diplomats, majority of the diplomats right now, they are more or less related to their government. More than that, I know for sure that a lot of countries name their diplomats in accordance to the political party that is ruling, or whoever party is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So the biggest question is, would the cyber diplomats be restricted in a way from the governments or like political parties that are ruling in that particular moment? So these are things that we should consider. So we put a couple of components together. Of course, this is open for a lot of conversation. So we think that there is a need to write an introduction, why we need cyber diplomacy, right? This is a new concept. People need to understand the need for that. Then we will need to look at the objectives. And the most important is the spirit of partnership between the countries and organizations that are willing to accept such a cooperation framework. And then the actual components, we're looking at the mechanism, we're looking at communication, how we share, particularly in Europe. They speak so many languages. So the same idea how we looked at other cooperation strategies and frameworks, we have to adapt it, to translate it, and so on. So there are logistics involved. Eventually implementation, what are the steps necessary for the countries to implement the framework? Evaluation monitoring. So what we could see from the previous research is that there were some frameworks, formal or informal, but they have not been evaluated and monitored, which means that's why we did not see results coming out of them. So if we will create this framework, we should have evaluation and monitoring components so we can follow up to see how efficient is that. And eventually the conclusion, we want to call everyone to implement their framework at their country level, so in international organizations, because this is the entire idea of having, I guess, a cooperation framework. And yeah, Dr. Alex, would you like to?
So in conclusion, we believe that there's a need to have a framework that puts countries together in order to avert these, cyber conflicts. And the more countries that we get involved in this conversation, I think the more we shall be able to be good at in averting and combating these cyber threats.
Thank you so much, everyone. Any questions or suggestions? Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ryan. Thanks for each talk. I appreciate it. A lot of thoughts came up, but you addressed a lot of them. One thing that's not completely clear to me at the present is kind of separating this into, there's defense and then there's like the actions of like government entities in cyberspace. And those are like two components. Like, is this trying to address one specifically?
Yes, I guess, Dr. Would you like, I mean, I can start, and yeah. So one of the things, so by the way, Marymount University is a Center of Cybersecurity Excellence in Defense. so we by default believe in defense. So we by default don't support any offensive type of activities. So I think first things first. So I think one of the things that we all agree is that whatever is the first need, and the first need is that there are active cyber attacks that are hitting our critical infrastructure, that is damaging materialistic and non-material goods and eventually people in the cyber warfare. So I think, in my opinion, the first thing that we need to address is the defensive side, right? So first we need to protect ourselves, and then we can talk about other things that are not that urgent. In 2016, if I'm not wrong, Russia attacked a power plant in Ukraine, which left like a fourth of a country without energy for like 3 or 4 days in a row. So a country like mine, Moldova, if you do that, which is a country of 2 million people, 4 days of power plant, lack of energy, that would be a complete disaster. So if we're looking at the urgency or the priorities, I think, in my opinion, the defense is the first one. So we would do a framework that first looks at defense as the first priority, and then whatever comes after. Right? Yeah.
You know, you see, even when we're doing this, we have to also look at how military conflict is averted using diplomatic tools. Because you find tools like sanctions being used, you find other tools like peer pressure, whereby, let's say, we know, okay, China is very friendly with Russia, we put Russia under pressure, come on, talk to Russia, talk to China, talk to Russia, so that they're able to stop what they are doing. If you don't do that, then we're cutting you off, you know, we're also putting sanctions on you. So I think that that's now the other side of defense. And I think also NATO is doing a great job in trying to do that. When the NATO ally is coming to kind of defend another NATO member. Now, the problem with offense is that, especially with cyber, you have no control of the trajectory. Yeah, for a missile, we know where the missile is going to hit. What about cyber? It will be complete chaos. Yes, that's why we're trying to emphasize the defense side. Yes.
That makes sense.
Thank you so much for the question.
Have you guys looked into what the Five Eyes Alliance may be able to do? The Five Eyes, it's a cyber alliance involving the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand.
Yeah, I'm aware of them. Yeah. We veered away from that because we looked at the UN, what they're doing as, you know, a body that's bringing more countries. So we want to have more countries in the conversation, because what we're seeing now, right now with cyber conflict is that a country that is poor may have deadly cyber capabilities that can, you know, cause destruction to even a very wealthy country. And also the other way around. So that's why I want to look at, okay, if the UN is running all these development programs and using these frameworks, and they're running so many countries behind, and these countries are adapting their frameworks at country level, can we also do the same for, you know, when it comes to cyber conflict? So that's why we're looking at something that has worked in other spaces and kind of leverage that to also the cyberspace.
And then, as I mentioned before, the cybersecurity is a interdisciplinary field. So there is space for everyone. political talks, healthcare. So I agree with Dr. Alex. And when we were looking about what would work, well, we have some of them that did not work, and they were quite limited. So maybe we need something at a bigger scale. So then it will get. So in other words, maybe we should address directly this big organization. So did anyone go to UN and said, hey, did you guys consider that this is a priority? So, and someone should start this conversation. So hopefully with our presentation and more efforts that are in the field, we kind of put this on the agenda. So until it's not too late.
So I guess I'm a little confused still of like, is the goal like some set of like technical protocols to thwart cyber attacks, or is it like a uniform response when a cyber attack is successful? Like, you know, the coordinated, do we, you know, pay the hackers and then do this tracking down and try and hold people accountable?
Maybe because it's diplomacy, I think maybe we should start with talking.
That's a good point.
So, but that's what we're trying to accomplish. So we hope that we're not going to get to the moment that we need to actively respond to an attack. If we have a good strategy in talking to each other, so maybe this will diminish the the attacks against each other. So if we come to an agreement that we all belong to the same objective of things like that, and eventually considering the threat as our external joint enemy, right? So,
Mhm. That would be nice. Although one like complicating thing in this that I'm sure you guys have thought about a lot, but with diplomacy, you're usually, thinking of this country talking to this country. When with the cyber attacks, there's like mostly non-state actors that are doing this. And even if it is the state, there's that plausible deniability of like, oh, that wasn't us, we didn't have any control over that.
So I think this is the reason why we are in 2023 and we don't have a working framework, is because this was the problem. And like Romania, for instance, I'm also educated, and Romania is one of my countries. So while they have a very good initiative and this new director for national cybersecurity, they also have the most talented hackers in Romania that they are fighting against in their own territories. So it is a paradox, right? So it's like you have the enemy inside the house, right? So that's where maybe a framework would help, that if we have a bigger goal, then even though these are our citizens, they are the enemy of the cooperation. So we all work together in defending against the enemy. It doesn't matter where the enemy physically is located on the map. So I know it sounds really, but that's the reason why we're here. It's because it's so complex and complicated. So now this is more like a call from us to everyone. Like, okay, we are cybersecurity professionals. I also have a master's degree in international development. Maybe that's why but we want the diplomats to come and tell us how we can make this, because you guys did that for like what, 14th century, so you know better how the things work. So tell us how we cybersecurity can help you so this can happen.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great idea, because also you can take like what works from the different, like you said, people apply different, methods in their different countries. And so if someone's like, oh, this worked over here, maybe we can try this more
on a
exactly
bigger level. Yes, that would be great. Yep.
Thank you for a great talk. Have you thought about like where actually most of the people, hackers, get trained? Is it mainly at the university level, or is people who are too
Training the hackers.
No. But
That's something that we don't do.
no. But I'm saying mainly it needs to be addressed at that level where people are getting educated and they get like enough tools to think broadly. So that was the only comment.
In actual sense, when you look at some of the threat actors, sometimes we get access to some of these intel feeds. Some of them are really like high school kids.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Self-taught. Okay, and they can make, because of the GDPs where they are, they can make more money from cybercrime.
Yeah.
And they're causing havoc. So they're not necessarily university graduates. For the most part, these are self-trained kids.
Yeah, and I can back up on this. Again, I'm from Romania. By the way, this is a hub for cyber attacks. So it's interesting to have the hut. So I don't know if you heard, but I think back in 2018 was this attack against cybersecurity cameras in Washington, D.C. at the level that 80% of the security cameras were turned off by a group of very experienced hackers. Well, those very experienced hackers turned out to be 3 kids from Romania with ages between 16 and 18. Well, so you'll ask, who trained them? It's a 16 years kid. Well, let me tell you, Romania is not a Nordic country, but quite a Eastern country. So when I was little, we had really long winters. I'm talking about months of snow. So what do you think these kids do when outside is snowy, right? So we had so many, like me growing up, we did not have much activity, considering that these are Romania is not, but Moldova is a developing country. So we did not have much activity. It was snow outside and we were connected to the internet. So guess what happens, right? So a lot of the generation that the hackers right now that you see them on the younger side, on their 20s. This is when they were like 14 and there was nothing else, no sports activity, nothing that they can be involved. So their play game was security, and not having a clear security framework at the national level, not telling them what is legal, not illegal. They just play their chances, right?
In a very similar situation, I am from the Dominican Republic. In a very similar situation, I'm from the Dominican Republic, and I want to say maybe 6 to 10 years ago, all of the billboards in the capital, Santo Domingo, all of them were hacked to play a message of like nothing. It was nothing. It was like hello or something like that, something silly, but they were all wiped down. And they were also wiped by kids of 14 to 16 years old. The Dominican Republic is a third world country, and it is also under development. Back then and still now, things like internet cost a lot of money. Computers cost a lot of money, to the point where when your computer is slowing down, old or deprecating, kids move to re-image it into another type of OS that can last longer, because things cost and it is very difficult to upgrade. So going back to that, it is just a matter of, you don't have anything else to do, survival, you either learn or don't have. My first encounter with Linux was when I was like 6, and I did not even know it was Linux. I just learned how to use it because the computer that we have at home was a Windows. It was already past its age. I didn't even know how it was running. Now that I know about computers, I don't know how that computer was still running. So it was then changed into a Linux computer that requires less resources, and it ran better on older systems. But that's something that just happens. This training, for the most part, is a self-taught thing of trial and error. You continue to learn a little more. Sometimes you're trying to do X thing and it's not working, so you go and search why it's not working, and in the process of searching you learn 3,000 things, and you're like, wow, I was able to break into that. And then it just builds. This knowledge base just tends to build.
Yeah, one thing that I can, and then I don't know, we have time, but I guess we're the only ones here. What we are very proud at Marymount University, for example, is, by the way, this summer we do a cyber AI camp for middle and high school kids. It's completely free because it's sponsored by NSA and National Science Foundation. So if you go to Marymount website and you have kids, families, friends, neighbors, so we're taking the kids for cybersecurity training. So one of the things that we're doing, and maybe this can be part of our framework, is taking these vulnerable ages, which is 14, 15, 16, and teach them the right thing. So because if you take them in a control environment like a cyber camp and show them what's legal or not, maybe we can solve a problem on the longer run. So these kids take their route of cybersecurity professionals and not hackers. But the problem is not all the countries have capabilities to do cyber camps. That's why me personally, back to my roots, I'm an American citizen, and I'm very proud to help back my roots and my country. So I'm trying to show them that this is what we do here in the US, and this is how we diminish the cyber attacks that they're in the US. So maybe if you replicate the good practices, you guys will be in a better position in the future. So this is another thing. Yeah, I think there's a hand or a question.
Yes, thank you. It has been a wonderful panel and discussion. I got a question by Moritz Blatt. They says, what are your thoughts on making sure that national security and individual privacy are balanced in the context of cyber diplomacy?
That's a very interesting topic.
Because, there are still very, very, very few countries even that have been able to address the issue of privacy. And for me, this is my own personal opinion. The reason why most governments don't even have a policy around privacy could be also what they do, which is monitor their citizens to see what they're doing. Okay, because having this law in place would kind of limit those kind of, that kind of work which some of these governments do. How does that become as a diplomatic element? that is something worth thinking about.
Yeah.
Because, when a diplomatic tool also interferes with how government runs, most likely what you're going to see is that the governments may not be willing to use a diplomatic tool.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, Dr. Bell?
Yes, my thought is back to my roots, European GDPR. Everyone, when GDPR came, it was a mix of feelings. Some of them were super happy, some of them were very sad. Companies got fined. So I think a diplomatic tool that incorporates existing functions or some tools that already work well, like GDPR, I think it can be a good start, right? So for example, if we're looking at cyber diplomacy, and we started at the European level because they were more advanced in putting these concepts on the table, they already have GDPR. So I think ideally is to integrate the existing laws into the framework. So in this way, the framework is not going against the law, because that's definitely not going to work, but rather work together in order to fulfill the objective. So but we're gonna, I guess, live and see what's gonna happen. Definitely we do have GDPR. It's interesting because we're teaching in the university the law, so it's hard to say that we don't have a federal privacy law in the US and why Europeans have it and not. So imagine kids that are freshmen, so imagine how you explain them why Europe has GDPR and we don't, right? But then you go back and say, well, individual states do respond to privacy. So if there will not be a federal framework on the privacy side, then we're going to go with the states. So let's see what happens. Thank you for the question. I don't know if we have another.
Yes, thank you. We don't have any other question or comment on the cyberspace. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, we'll leave you 20 minutes to enjoy and fun.
Talk about making a cyber diplomacy course.
Definitely. Like at Marymount University, we have a doctorate of science in cybersecurity. So for our online audience, two of our students are here. So one of the ways we all the time test our territory for the course is by introducing some such topics like this, see if this is good enough, and then we extend it to a course. So actually we do have some global cybersecurity courses. We don't call it yet cyber diplomacy, but we will see what is the reaction towards this topic, and eventually we will convert in a doctoral special topics in cybersecurity, because we have a space over there. So definitely, and we see a lot of students that are currently diplomats, and we actually have, being very close to Washington DC, we have a lot of students that are part of the diplomatic staff of embassies, and we see their interest in cybersecurity because they see the need. So which makes sense, right? So, and we actually have been requested from some countries to provide some cyber diplomacy training, and that's when we came together and we're like, what we can do, right? Yeah.
The Soviet Union, that they used to have certain states that were like heavily kind of groomed to be like mathematicians and hackers.
Well,
Because I know like there were certain countries that were like more.
It is true. Like even today, our math national exam is really hard. Yes, it is possible. And yeah, this is a little bit deviation from the topic, but a little bit what Jennifer saying, plus the, yeah, so imagine that I'm not that old, but I did go to school and we had chalk. We do not have computers for a long time, so not too many things you can do with chalk, but definitely good math. So yes, majority of people that come from Eastern Europe countries, they emphasize so much not only math but science in general. Think about the trying to conquer the universe and all this astronomy and physics, and the fact that the USSR, they wanted to be the first one on the moon, whatever that thing was. So it was a tendency towards science, but then guess what? The computers came. So now let's put that chalk knowledge and application to see to, yes, we did all disassemble computers and assemble them back. So, yep. Well, I think if there is no other question, well, thank you so much for being our audience, and thank you for the question. That was a great discussion, and we are very happy to receive any comments, recommendation. You can find us on LinkedIn. Intentionally put the first slide so you can look us in LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so any cooperation or thoughts, we are very open to do so. Thank you so much.